those who just tuned in, we are talking about the interest rates. But of course, the bigger thing here is that the repo rate went from 7.75% to 7.5%. Mr. Daniel Steinman. For those that do not know, this is a Corner Chat. Let's talk business with Mr. Daniel Steinman. The repo rate, 7.75% to 7.5%.
It's a very small move. It's a quarter percentage point.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go into that whole distinction between a percent and a percentage point. Just take my word for it. We talk about it came down 1/4%.
Yes.
Technically, it came down 1/4 percentage point, and live with it.
Yeah.
The fact that I tell you that's just the way things are.
Yeah.
You remember that movie Babe of the little pig?
Yeah.
And the mice in the corner? The way things are. the sarcasm in it. Yeah. So repo rate is what we call a base rate. It is a value that a central bank uses to determine the cost of money.
Yeah.
Now that is a mouthful, so let me explain a little bit. If that privilege that you have of being able to go to the bank and tell them, I need to borrow $100,000 to buy a car. The bank wants some form of compensation, and it's called an interest rate, because that's where the commercial bank now, not the central bank, that's where they make their money. Depending on the interest rate, they make more money or less money. When the repo rate was 3.5% during COVID, the banks didn't make any money, didn't make any profit. So they were suffering. And after COVID, from the end of 2022, the Bank of Namibia, the central bank, they jacked up the interest rates very aggressively, very fast. Remember my opinion? Too quick, too fast. Too fast, too much.
Yeah.
So if you look at the actual value, you will see it's that measly 1/4%, 0.25.
Yeah.
But it's a start. And the fact, as I said earlier, that they did it before the Federal Reserve started reducing interest rates and before the South African Reserve Bank did the same, shows that their take on the Namibian economy is very positive. Now, last weekend, I did a presentation, economic presentation, to a group of business people. And a businessman, he's never concerned, or it's my experience that he or she is never concerned about history, what's behind you. The businessman is always looking forward. Now, so for that reason, because he's looking forward, interest rates are very important to him, because he needs to make a calculation, he needs to form an opinion on if he wants to go and borrow money, what is he going to pay for it? And remember, it's a liability. He needs to borrow money to make an investment. You need investment for future economic growth, but it is still a liability. He still has to pay back the loan to the bank.
Yeah.
So now you get to prime. What is prime? Prime is the upper part of the interest rate spectrum. Now remember, repo, base value. Prime is what the commercial bank is going to charge you, and that was 11.75%. That if the repo rate came down by 25 basis points or 1/4 percentage point, the prime rate must also come down. Yeah. So now the prime rate is 11.5%. Now the question in the mind of most business people is, how fast will the interest rates come down, and how far? Remember, it's exactly the opposite of my criticism when I said too fast, too much.
Yes.
Now, because nobody knew how high interest rates were going to go. So it came as a shock when it went from 3.5% to 7.75%. That is a massive increase. That is, in fact, basically a doubling of, slightly more than a doubling of interest rates. And you remember our previous two conversations where I made some practical calculations. If you look at, and I used a 2% increase or a 2% decrease, and can you remember that eventually it came out that for the average household, the shift in interest rate meant about $1,300 less in their pocket every month. You know, if you work for the Bank of Namibia and you earn a fat salary, you laugh at that type of money. I mean, it's got no impact on your personal spending. But if you are like you and me, ordinary Namibians trying to make an ordinary living, $1,300 makes a difference.
Makes a huge difference.
And if you've got children that are still going to school, it makes a huge difference. And this is what I'm trying to get over to the authorities in their mind. Don't think like a fat cat thinks. Think like an ordinary Namibian who really live from paycheck to paycheck. And Elsby, you know how it goes. The paycheck is always done before the month is done.
No, the paycheck is actually done before the actual amount is paid in your bank account.
So that is the reality.
Yes.
And if you look at the prime rate that came down from 11.5 to 11.25, you know, you will see that. I was referring to my calculations that I made there. I used 2%. So we are still very far away from it. And in the last part of our conversation, I want to go a bit into that question: where will we eventually stop?
Okay, let's do that. Let's quickly go for that short break, and once we come back, we continue this conversation.